Talk human to me.
Talk human to me.
Talk human to me.
Human to me.
Talk human to me. Talk human to me.
Welcome to the Talk Human to Me podcast,
where entrepreneurs open up to questions beyond their ideas and ventures.
Who are they really?
And why do they do what they do?
I don't think that people put just me in these boxes. I think people put people in boxes because it helps them understand.
What's up, beautiful humans? It's Jeff Zhao here, your Talk Human to Me host. So, we find that doers, creators, and makers often look for podcasts that offer insights into entrepreneurship. Although each of our guests are incredible entrepreneurs, we talk with them about everything but entrepreneurship. This podcast wants to remind you about all the other parts that make you a complete human being, like our emotions, our hobbies, our mental health, philosophy, and where we grew up. And most entrepreneurs know Aisha Sheikh as a Singularity Global Solutions Program Fellow and a Ventures Incubator participant. She was also part of the Stanford ChangeLabs as a senior designer and strategist, and a design elective teacher at the Nueva school. So you can actually find all of her stuff and even more at aishaSheikh.com. That's her site. But all that went out the window, and we just wanted to talk with Aisha the Human. Aisha the Human thinks about things like the unpredictability and constantly evolving identities of humans and how, quote, where they've come from and what they're doing today, it doesn't mean anything about what could happen in the future for them. So, if you're an entrepreneur, doer, maker, or creator looking to balance out your podcast playlist, listen in as Aisha sits down to talk human to me. Okay, let's get started. Aisha, I think so many people are going to be excited to hear this episode with you because you're super dope. You know you are. And I'm really happy that you're here. So, as a lot of the listeners know, or if you are a new listener, we always start with the exact same question. And that is, what about humans strikes you the most?
What a big question. And I haven't listened to any of your podcasts, so I have nothing to base this off of, which is a good thing. So I can talk just from my heart directly. What fascinates me about humans? I think what fascinates me is how unpredictable we are. So I can say that one person to another just completely are made up of completely different. We're the same in terms of our biological aspects, but you can't predict what a human will do. I think I'm just thinking about this as I've been trying to figure out, I know I'm not really supposed to talk about work, but because of some of the projects I've looked at, a lot of the things I've tried to tailor towards humans have, one of the things that I've found a challenge is, well, we can't really predict that a human will use this the way we think they'll use this. So that's what I find fascinating, is that you can't and you shouldn't put a human into a box in terms of their identity, where they've come from, what they're doing today. It doesn't mean anything about what could happen in the future for them.
Well, I guess before I dive into what boxes you usually see other people in, what boxes do people currently put on you usually?
So I get boxed into, I'm the international person of color, people with curly hair.
By the way, for those that are listening, she has a dope haircut. This amazing haircut, because your hair used to be longer, right?
Yeah,
much longer, but she has a super dope haircut with awesome highlights. So yeah.
Yeah. So what other ones I get put into? Creative person. There are boxes of female box. What does it mean if you're like categorized as a female, as a person who has a heart, sensitive, these kind of things. So it's just a way of maybe I'm even like, you know, you have your career boxes, so work that I do, so design, teaching, work around strategy, and then you have your boxes of your identity, as in like your physical identity, your visual identity, or historical identity, your culture, what you look like, and then your boxes of the way that you speak, whether it's what does it mean that you have a certain accent that you do in the language that you speak, and then the boxes of categories of if you've traveled before, places that you go, and what does that say about you?
So it's actually interesting because I did just ask like what boxes people currently put you in. So now it's actually making me think about, why do you think people put you in these boxes?
I don't think that people put just me in these boxes. I think people put people in boxes because it helps them understand it. I think people need to be able to picture or comprehend who you are, and it helps them when it works in their world. And I think this idea of even talking about boxes or framings came from constantly thinking about like how I am perceived by others, and I think when I used to be scolded that I even think about these things, and then I realized that
just for like having the thought, or like going on a tangent with these thoughts, or by who?
My ex.
Your
My
ex?
Yeah.
We won't mention him or her. I don't know. Him by name.
He knows who he is. I know that he would get frustrated with me because I would be thinking about, the way that people perceive you. And then I had this workshop on privilege and understanding like intersectionality and identity. And I realized that the fact that I've thought so much about identity and how your perception is and where you're accepted versus where you're not accepted comes so much from having been confronted with situations where I do have to think about this, and not having to think about what boxes exist is a sign of privilege. So when people don't have to notice their skin color or their gender, privilege is the ability to not notice boxes and identities.
That's actually really, really funny. Because there's like this running joke, especially in this town. We're currently in San Francisco, of like when the whole hipster culture started, and it was based around like not being put in a box. But then now there's actually that actually makes me think, it's like, well, yeah, if you do see like the quote unquote identified hipster community, it is largely white and it is largely male, right? So it's interesting you just talked about privilege. So it's like, oh yeah, that's interesting, because but when you do see a single mother with 3 kids who's working, and I bet as I'm describing that right now, people are probably automatically create a paradigm in their head, and that person is probably a black woman, because that's the box that they framed that makes them understand, right? And it's actually also making me think about like humans are so. They're not that as intelligent or imaginative as we want to think we are, because we're unable. Simply from the fact that we have to create existing frameworks in order to imagine something, right? I was just watching a YouTube video with it was a old interview that Neil deGrasse Tyson had, and he was talking about the 4th dimension, and just like our stupid human minds just cannot possibly fathom and truly understand what a 4th dimension looks like. So we have to use existing constructs to somehow mathematically put it was just really funny. But you're making me think of that. It's like, oh yeah, we have these boxes, and like when you said, or boxes, and the fact that we have to say boxes or frames, and yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, does it frustrate you, or does it just fascinate you?
I think when I had not come to terms with myself and the complexity, and I was trying to simplify myself, it was frustrating me that
Simplify yourself from what? From
when I felt that I had to simplify my story in order for people to get me, that was frustrating. So when people would look at me and say like, where are you from? The common question of where are you from? And then I would say, well, I'm from Canada. And then they're like, no, but where is your face from? I've actually had that where it was like after a buildup of like, oh, but where were you born and where are you, like, you know, and then it was like, no. What I really want to know is, because I said Kenya, because that's where my family's from, if you want to, one of the places. And then they're like, but where's your face from? Because then I didn't fit the like Kenya picture because I'm not dark skinned enough or something like that. So anyways, I think it did frustrate me at some point, but then I had so much time to, and I think about these things, and, you know, reading books about identity. Amin Maalouf has a book on identity. And
who?
Amin Maalouf. I hope I have the right name. Yes.
Okay.
Maalouf. He's Lebanese, French Lebanese. Anyways, he talks a lot about identity and the complexity of it, and that your identity can be also related to food and what you eat, and your identity could be nationality, and it could be cultures and places you've traveled, and how it's like all a compilation of different, like a melange of different identities, and not just like I was born here and therefore I'm from here. Anyways, so like coming to terms with it has been a lot of like soul searching and maybe just even acceptance of myself, and not having to frame myself based on other people, and being okay with not understanding, actually. Like I don't...
Understanding yourself.
Yeah,
or...
not understanding in the sense that I need to be able to comprehend when someone says, where are you from? I need to be able to like qualify it in a certain way in my mind in order for it to matter. And I don't think of it that way. Like, I don't think I need to put it put it in a box and tie it with a ribbon and hand it to someone as a gift for them to understand. I don't need to look at it that way. I can look at it as like a rhizome of like this complex root and that's what it is. And I'm not going to try to like pack it into a bud and share it with them. And so in myself, I was able to just accept that, yeah, it is like these weird intricacies, and that's just who I am. And in my mind, it's simple enough. So, and that's what it is. But yeah, your question was, because I feel like I've gone on a tangent here.
Oh, I don't know. I actually don't remember what my question was, but I mean, I'm interested in actually, as you're describing this journey of getting past that, was this something recent? Like how long did it take you to get to that point, you know, growing up, you know, since like from a kid? Because I'm assuming these questions have been tossed at you since you were young, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when did you finally say, fuck it, this is who I am, and I don't have to explain it to anyone?
I don't think there was I don't recall a specific moment, but I do recognize that I would even say just in the last year, I've noticed in myself just a sense of calmness, and then other people have pointed that out to me. So it has more to do with people painting me as this, you know, strong woman, et cetera, that they will call me that and say, like, you represent this to me. And maybe part of it is having students, younger students that are at the Nueva school that are under 18, and having them see that, because you don't see your journey, but then when someone sees you at a later part of your journey than they are, and you see them looking up to you, I think I was able to just say to myself, you know what? I feel I am enough. Like, I heard people say these things and sort of remind me I am enough. And I can say to myself that, it's not perfect, but it's perfect enough the way that I am, and sort of just accepting myself. And a big part of it has recently to do with coaching. I have.
What? Can you describe what coaching means?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was really fortunate to be accepted in this fellowship called the Coaching Fellowship. And the founder, Jane Finette, is amazing. And what she has, it's a nonprofit, and she pairs you with, and it's focused on women leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And she pairs you with an executive coach to be able to think about anything that you imagine would be a useful skill for you to hone in on, or something that is in the way right now. And if you pull this thing out of the way, you'll be able to get to your next step. So it's really pairing you with an individual who's able to kind of guide you to getting to your goals.
Is it like a form of what people might as a paradigm think of as therapy, or is it like it's basically like a specific type of therapy?
Yeah. So no, I have a therapist as well as a coach.
Okay.
And these are two different things.
Okay.
But I do feel like it was really useful to have two separate things because some people use their coach in a way that would be more useful to talk to a therapist about these things. Maybe like cognitive behavioral therapy, where it's like is probably the closest tied to what I imagine coaching is, because it's because therapy is also like there's so many different types of therapists.
Yeah.
But there's a therapist where you just like psychodynamic, where you're just talking to them and they're just listening. Coaching is definitely way more proactive. We'll give you homework. And I think cognitive behavioral therapy actually is more tied to like your goals.
Yeah.
But
actually, a lot of people can probably learn a lot about cognitive and like therapies from a mutual friend, Erin Frey.
Yes.
She's actually, for people who are listening, she's one of the episodes. You can check that out.
Yeah. So whereas coaching is the person I was paired with, Wendy Appel. She's an executive coach. She works with companies and individuals and helps them really understand themselves. And there's different coaching styles. So what she had, I'll just give an example. She had a book she had written tied around the Enneagram, which is like one way of measuring personality. And by being able to understand what number I am, if anyone understands the Enneagram, it's kind of what Myers-Briggs was founded off of. And through understanding my personality, I was able to better focus on how to get to a certain vision that I have in my life, and be able to navigate through life without being on autopilot, and really being like awake to my behaviors, why certain patterns keep coming back and forth, back into me. And so it's like really someone by your side helping you. I would say coaching is used a lot with like professional as well as personal development.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talked about initially what people box you into, and then why you think people box you into it. So how do you react now that it sounded like you've recently started really becoming very comfortable with saying, let them box me, right? Because I know who I am, and I know I have many stories, and nothing is linear. Nothing is like, everything's permeable, right? how do you feel now when people do box you? Let's say when like people meet, you're like, oh yeah, that's that creative Canadian
Canadian. I am Canadian.
Yeah, like
You
the
don't
creative,
even know.
Yeah, the creative Canadian from where her family's from.
Yeah. And like maybe that seems fine to me because it's a nice all wonderful things to be known as.
What's one of the things that like are like every time that used to bother you?
I love this question because haven't been bothered in a while, but I can't think of it exactly, but I know that we had this exercise recently where we have like definers where we don't like being called. So like people will call me exotic. And I had to go around in the room and sort of like, what words do we want to get rid of? And I'm like, oh, please just like get rid of it. And then I had like my white female friend being like, I'll take exotic. No one ever calls me that. And so, yeah, I think it has more to do with being defined as just, I don't know. It's like, yeah, or maybe like she's a graphic designer or she's a, it's more like, it's more when you're defined as something and then it limits what you can do or what you can be because that's what you are. Maybe I'm trying to think if I would be bothered if someone was like defining me as maybe like religious definitions, like, her family is like, she's brought up Muslim, like, I don't know. It's just a question mark for me of like, of being classified as someone who, based on your name, like that's a box. My name, Aisha Sheikh. I've been in like airport situations where based on my name, I was pulled aside. And
although you were randomly selected.
It was a little worse than that because it was worse than that because I had someone waiting for me at the boarding gate in Qatar, in Doha, like on the way from Kenya, and they just wouldn't tell me who they are, and they just describe themselves as, I am from the government of United States of America, and I have questions for you. So anyways, there are some kind of boxes where I'm suddenly stripped of everything I've ever done, and I just feel like, oh, I'm being defined as, someone with a Muslim name, whose family is, like then my ethnic background and all these things are what I am, and I'm really being put into a certain box. So I think actually, yeah, thanks for asking that question, because I was trying to think why I was bothered by this, and I realized though it comes down to when you're discriminated, or when I'm in a box where I'm in a situation of being in a room with my, currently working with my business partner, and we've talked about this where we have a male in the room and the male's making eye contact with him, not me, and sort of I'm in the, female, and so you're just kind of, maybe you're an assistant or something like that, and the male has the charge. And so many female co-founders talk about this experience. So these are that's another example of being pegged as like a certain box that people don't even realize they put you there.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's usually there's a lot of kind of, well, I don't think any box is ever harmless, like completely harmless. I would say some are not as actively aggressive or damaging, or just negative, or just negative in nature by nature. But there are some that are truly actively hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
And they are made to inflict pain.
Yeah.
It's almost like this microscope that just centers a sun's beam on you so that you just start slowly getting burned over time.
I would say that there are definitely moments in my life, or one of the things that I'm currently thinking a lot about, and I've avoided, you've asked me to speak to you for a while now, and I've avoided speaking with you because
for those that are listening, she doesn't mean speaking to me like in person in general. We're good friends, okay? She means going on this podcast. Yeah.
No, I've avoided every time you're like, let's do this podcast. I'm like, maybe not now. And part of it has to do with wanting to know how much of myself I want to share, and being comfortable to the point of knowing that nobody in the world can ever touch or like impact what's inside me, all that I've built up. Even though, yes, when I go to a border and they question my intention based on what I look like, what my name is, my family background, all that stuff, I think there must be a point we get to where no one can harm you anymore. And so I've been wanting to share my story for a while, but I keep debating, what is my brand? And I think that what we put out there in the world, people sort of understand you based on what you share. And I want to be the one who shares my story and to be the narrator of my brand or of my story, and create my own brand and not let other people take it into their hands and decide what I am. And I know some people might think this is why am I overthinking this, or why does it matter?
Well, actually, I'm actually curious about that. Like, talk about why it's important that you have that people understand that they can't control who you are and who your story is, and that people need to understand that your story is always going to be yours, and that there's many parts to you.
Why is it important that just so I understand the question, why is it important that they...
I guess, no, very specific, like it seems like it's very top of mind for you, and it's very important to you. And I think just from describing ways that you've been treated by people just over time in general, and like with incidents like the bullshit at the airport, right? What makes it top of mind for you, that like my story is determined by me. Other people can't define that. They might hear one part and that might be the only thing that they know about me. But people need to understand that there's a whole world and ecosystem that is Aisha Sheikh.
I think when you were talking, all I could think is maybe because we know about the hero's journey, and this is like that theory of do you remember whose concept that is? I can't remember, but anyways, idea.
The actual concept was by Iliad.
Yeah. Okay, Iliad originally, but then yes, it was described as anyone goes on that journey, and sort of and any good story is told in the same exact like prescription of a good story. I
think that's why kids loved mythology and why comic books are so popular, right? Because they're all based on the structure of the hero's journey.
So you have this person going on, starting on their journey, and then they meet some wise sage along the way, and then they uncover some like crazy, maybe they're faced with like some problem, and then they discover some sort of like really great magic solution or potion or something, and then like in the end they come back a wiser person or something like that.
Star Wars.
Yes, exactly. And so I think of that when you asked me that question. For some reason that came to my mind, and I just think maybe because it's important to me that I tell my own heroes or heroines journey, and that someone else doesn't go out and write my narrative for me. And also part of it is that I think I have a long-term story, a long-term goal, which is not that I want to write a book and then have like my life story become, you know, it goes into a book and then people read it and then that's it. And then I go around and do talks about it. And I think that's a beautiful journey that some people are taking. And that's for them. But for me, it's that my goal is all of the things that I do and, you know, work around design for social impact, human-centered design, these kind of, you know, teaching. I want just to the work that I do as a social entrepreneur to be just because that's what I enjoy doing. And at the end, you know, later on in this narrative of my life, I can share what it is what brought me to who I am today. And people who think, you know, maybe I couldn't have done it can look at my story as a reason for them to possibly have some chance. And I don't want it to end at writing that book.
Well, let me step away from like the stuff that you're doing and let's say this is actually something that you know, I'll give you an example. I'll first ask, like, who do you want people to just know you as a human being? Like, this is human being Aisha Sheikh. You're on your deathbed. Like, you're 90 years old, like, crapping yourself because you can't control your own bowels anymore. Well, actually, I don't know, in the future, maybe we all live to 200, right?
Yeah. Like, we're going to live longer.
Yeah. Who do you want, like, within the 5 people that are closest to you, just standing around you, what do you want them to be saying about you?
I want them, in terms of saying to me or after I've gone, or to the world about me, or what?
Well, yeah, let's say you can still be, you know, at that moment where you still have your wits about you and you can still hear them, or you can literally be in your kind of in your little, however, I don't know how you want to be.
I'll be buried.
Yeah. I want them to melt me and then mold me into like a action figure.
Yeah, that's even cooler. Maybe we should all just like turn our ashes into like 3D printed filament, and that way we like.
I bet you there's already someone doing that.
That is definitely the most Silicon Valley thing we've said so far. So I want people to know that whether I'm gone or I'm still there, I want to be. I actually think about this, by the way. I've often thought about when I die. I think that comes from like my family being Muslim, and they always tell us to think about, you know, what happens after you die. So I've been
I didn't know that. Why is that like a Muslim narrative?
It's like a lot to do with maybe different to Christianity, where like your sins have been forgiven. It's a lot to do with not just this, but you know, it's kind of, we're on this earth as a test, and as you know, the real thing is to be prepared for the hereafter. That's the real life. So yeah, so that's kind of, you know, whether that's like day to day what I do or believe or like practice, it's more I know that it's like things that I've been told growing up, so it gets into your like, you know, subconsciously I'm kind of like okay, I'm gonna be preparing or sort of like when I'm buried, it's not gonna end there, or more so just like even thinking about dying is like something I've been raised with. And then I would say like being around all of my friends, not a lot of people talk about that, so I think I forgot about it for a while until recently when my dad said something around like, yeah, I don't know, I kind of want to die in like 10 years when I'm like still super healthy. I don't want to like struggle and be like in pain old. And I like freaked out, and then I remembered that like that's just like how my family thinks. Like, no, Dad, you're supposed to like want to live until 100 or 200, you know, and like, don't you want to live forever as long as possible? So it's such a like weird concept to me. But anyways, we really digress. But I want people to know
These 5 people.
Yes.
You're closest, yeah.
I want these 5 people to remind the rest of the world that I don't think I've ever taken for granted one breath of air that I've had on this earth. So I think every moment in my life, for as you know, we have fun, and I think having fun is part of living too. But I've always had this, I've always cared and had like a mission around people and doing good on this earth and leaving this earth better than before I entered. And I think that, you know, I always have like the happy-go-lucky friend, or, you know, the person who's laughing with you or smiling with you, even when things haven't always been easy and definitely were not easy. They'll maybe be those 5 friends that told the rest of the world that when Aisha sort of puts a front of like being sometimes picky about things, or some people who didn't know me well, like one of my coworkers described me as you're definitely a princess. Like, you know, you clearly in Kenya have people doing things like, you know, serving you or something like that, and had this impression of me as like a princess. And it was like really shocking to me, because I'm like, wow, I wish they knew that I've actually had to like, if in fact I was the one who was like taking care of the rest of my family, because I grew up with a mom that wasn't well. But I somehow put on this persona that I've had a perfect life, because I never wanted to see myself as someone who was a victim. And I don't have patience for this victim mentality or like experience of life. I'm like, you know, things happen, you know, shit happens. Sometimes it's hard, and you just have to like move on and, you know, go see a therapist. Don't throw all that stuff at your friends. Be good to your friends, be good to everyone. And I want the world to know that when a lot of things seem like, you know, like everything seems like it's all falling apart, you can still be kind to other people. And that's how I want to be remembered.
Well, I can definitely vouch for that. Like just knowing you, and even hearing some things now that I've never like heard about, and there's other just stories with you. There's every reason in the world, and there's so many people who have encountered the same things that you've encountered in life that just become bitter and very almost, I don't know if it's bitter or maybe that's the wrong word, or even the word hateful. It's just there is a suspicion of everything in life, right? And then there's also, you're actually just reminding me, making me think about just resilience and how resilience always somehow gets paired with this superhuman ability to have a positive outlook and a positive take on some of the most like just toxic negative things that we get confronted with. It's actually making me think largely about like just the story of so many immigrants. Like, I see my mom, she's just such a positive person, and you know there's like a lot of the common immigrant stories of people coming to they're faced with some of the most dire situations and challenges that they have to overcome, but then they're just so positive and just so happy, and you see like these amazing, like, I don't know if you've ever been to yeah, of course you have. You've like, whenever you're at like a family dinner with like, but everyone in the family is like what people, at least in the U.S., will label as immigrants, right? Those are the best dinners to like hang out at,
with
right?
like 80 people.
Yeah,
Maybe
where
more,
everyone's
like 30.
like it's like a simultaneous yelling at each other and laughing with each other at the same time, and it's great.
Yeah, I definitely think about what I thought of actually in like a lighter term of what you described of like that bitter person versus like the optimist. I remember someone at work was saying that they had a rescue dog, and that it's interesting, like, oh yeah, you got that rescue dog, the one that's like scared of everything and afraid that everything that's like gonna come near it is gonna attack it, like it was, once hurt, and suddenly it's like afraid of everything, versus then like that other rescue dog, you get one or the other. The other rescue dog is the one that's just like, love me, like play with me, and like I'm so happy to be here. And so I think I don't know, maybe that's like the nature versus nurture side too, in that whole debate. And I think it is something to be learned, and maybe it's in our own nature or DNA or whatever it is that makes some of us, completely bitter, and someone can be in like a similar experience and feel still very optimistic and trusting still, regardless of seeing horrible things out there that people have done, not assuming that is, I guess this was the age-old philosophical debate around like, are humans inherently evil or good, so that's been a discussion for the longest time, and I think your philosophy on life determines how you interact with other people, and then in turn, like the type of people that you bring into your life will be like literally a mirror of what you project out there in the world. So you can bring in negative people in your life if you're just negative all the time. You can bring in the positive people if you're projecting such a like aura of happiness that people want in their life as well. And I've had to be like very selective, and I think hitting the 30s at some point I was like, like when I hit the 30s, that's when that moment where you like have less fucks to give or whatever. And then started like saying, yep, I shouldn't be having any of these like people that I don't enjoy spending my time with, and I need to get to know myself or spend time with myself. I block off Sundays for myself. For the longest time I was very religious about this, and then this past summer spent it at Singularity University, so I didn't have any time to myself, but just having this like ritual for myself, having my morning pages, and writing every morning 3 pages free write, and or even like treating myself to, I think of like having a coach or a therapist, that's like really like treating myself to, this hour is just for me, and just like investing that time in myself that's all time stuff that I know that I've committed to. When I realized that I could say that I had like all of these friends, but could I truly say that Aisha Sheikh, me, I'm a friend as well to myself? And could I like put myself as like someone that I would want to spend time with and go away for a weekend with, or like even go to a restaurant or a movie with? Like, I started to say, you know what? I had like 180 days of Aisha, which was just like dates with myself that I ended July 21st, just like less than a month ago. And this was partially just knowing that I will never be able to like truly have a partner in life, have like someone that I share space with, or like a significant other, or like be a selfless friend if I don't truly know who I am and truly like invest that time and love myself. And the best way to get to that is saying like, I'm willing to have a date night with myself and like hang out with myself, and it's not tormenting me. In fact, I enjoy it. So anyways, that's just to say that, yeah, your outlook on life is really truly determined by like what's inside, and you can get the best people around you and sort of like by projecting that optimism, even if it's, or maybe even like realism. Like, I think I'm definitely more on the realism side rather than just like everything in the world is perfect. It's just, even when things are crappy, it's just that like I still have hope, and I will be motivated to get out of bed and know that I can change even just like one person's life, and that's a good enough reason to get out of bed.
Why do you think it takes people so much time to get to this point, to allow themselves to say, I want to be alone, or I want to have this time? Do you think it's always because a lot of times they get labeled as selfish or not generous enough?
Well, I think part of it is just a human, like the animal side of us, that we need to be in these tribes or nations or like groups and like social dynamics. And we need to belong. It's actually even like from a base, if you want to use Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like at that bottom is like a sense of belonging. And so I think, this is a fantastic question, because I think a lot about like, upbringing, sort of communal environments versus individualistic environments, and the cultures that I come from are both communal and individualistic. I come from both of those. So like my North American identity versus like my Middle Eastern, East African identity. These are like, my family's originally Yemeni, but migrated to Kenya many generations ago, and then to Canada. And so these are literally like identities that operate differently in terms of how much is valued, or like where like individualism is what's really valued, and success and sort of achievement in that North American sense, versus like service and like giving to others, and thinking a lot about like your community is what's really valued in like my East African and Middle Eastern identity. And so I think that humans are, we are told that certain things are selfish depending on if you're like from some cultures more than others. So like in North America, definitely it's seen as to be, in my, the opposite actually, in my Middle Eastern, East African identities, they would be seen as like very selfish to be saying no, like to helping someone with something, and sort of, valuing yourself more as a separate thing. And I think maybe there are like different levels, but definitely in North America, I think it is valued a bit more. And I think introspection is like probably even like not easy to like bucket into one country either, or like one North American, because I see it more in the West Coast than in the East Coast. So like people come from the East Coast and come to like California and they're like, man, these people are so like self-absorbed and they just want to like think
Goddamn
about
hippies.
think about themselves. And then I came here and then I was like, well, actually there's a lot to be learned from every place. So maybe there is some value to like that meditation or that yoga hour or like hiking in the woods. And I think that like if we just stop trying to like fit or say like this is the right way or that's selfish and like labeling or going back to the boxing thing, we can like just realize that there's a lot to be gained from everything and just find some balance. And like, and all humans are just like made up of so many different levels. And if we could just get out of that autopilot mode of behaving a certain way and really just like almost understand ourselves from a meta level, we can understand when it's appropriate to be one way versus another way, and find balance through this like introspective way of being.
This conversation right now, and I know some listeners are probably get annoyed. I always bring this book up, Sapiens. Mm-hmm. And it's just this always reminds me, like, you know, like again, most of the stuff that we humans that we see and have in our lives is literally was imagined. It's not a real thing that is needed. It's not like a fact, including values, right? Literally the concept of values and what is valued is not necessarily true. Most of them are actually not true. Like the ones that are actual evolutionarily and biologically fact are like the very bare bone, like bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy. Like again, where like being in groups and needing like some sort of social contact is actually needed for survival, shelter, sleep, right? And then there's a Homo Deus, the second book that came out. He actually talks about what you're just talking about now, which is like this, one of the very key things that also separates human beings from many other species is the insane ability to create and be creative and imagine things, right? And you're right. It's like we're constantly trying to stunt our creative stretch and our reach. It's just like the way that art is like at its, you know, infrastructure being stripped from schools, from like education, how we're always constantly trying to put boxes and frames and paradigms to make sense of things. It's like, well, no, everything has this infinite spectrum that, you know, some parts of the spectrum that we don't even know exist yet, right? And I think even just now, people are only starting to realize some of the things. Like people only now are starting to realize even the science behind the spectrum of sexuality, for example, right? I love, there's this one episode actually of Bill Nye Saves the World. The whole episode's about spectrum of sexual orientation. So that episode fascinated me actually.
Yep. I've learned a lot about it, especially here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And teaching students. And that's been, you know, very eye-opening in terms of, this goes again to like creating just labels. And then I think people don't get to fully ever express themselves because they're put into one category. And, you know, again, we're just so complex.
Right. The fact that we live in the U.S., that our dream is to buy a home, like almost like a blockade that blocks us from the rest of the world, is so weird that the more that we think about it. And I think it is strange. We were having a conversation earlier about how the concept of co-housing and co-communities and co-living communities are becoming like a thing now, because people are starting to realize it's actually more comfortable when I'm able to share an area with people and not just have a fenced off backyard and like my own single family home, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really also like education and art, just like thinking about that. Part of it's just like even what we were told to value by society, and they cut it. I think some schools cut the art education out, and now I definitely see like there's a realization of the value more and more. You know, hear people talk about design thinking and creativity, and I was looking at like skills of the future from like the World Economic Forum, and they were talking about I think creativity is now like on that rise. Every year you can see that skill is going to be necessary for people to be able to survive in the future when we have, you know, when automation happens and robots come into everything gets like roboticized, if that's a word. But anyways,
now it is.
And so creativity is like becoming, it might even be on towards number one now, as a skill that we're going to need in the future in order to be adaptable and resilient to whatever might come in the future. Because I think creativity is that skill that allows you to deal with uncertainty. So with this skill, you can, anything that comes to you, you can learn how to, because creativity is about being able to make connections with things that are not necessarily related and putting that together, and it comes from a world that's in your imagination of the future. And so this is so necessary for people to have this skill. And I know that especially progressive schools, but schools that are paying attention are knowing that arts is the form that allows people to have this skill. And one of the futures they talk about in this where this world might head to is like the Starfleet of like, you know, Star Trek, where we're like, our future is just focused on knowledge exchange as like the ideal epitome of what we need, and the creatives and the crafts and a world of service is what we become known for as humanity, and that's what we should strive for. And it shouldn't be about like, we redefine what a job means and what work means, and work becomes about being able to just be doing the things we ultimately wish for, which is to be more creative. And anyways, I've spent some time thinking about this over the summer.
Oh man, and this will definitely have to be part 2 with Aisha Sheikh, because we're definitely coming up to the hour now. And I just wanted to point out, by the way, that we now more than ever, with so many uncertainties, will need this creativity, right?
Yep. Definitely. I'm working on that, by the way.
That's awesome.
I'm not going to talk about work because I don't want to, but that's what I'm thinking about.
You guys can ask her and hit her up on social media or whatever after this. But no, I was just going to say, by the way, I think you also get an award for dropping references of both Star Wars and Star Trek in one episode. So congratulations on that. So we end every episode also with the same exact question. And that is, ultimately, what's the point of all of this?
What's the point of all of this? I think we're all trying to find some kind of meaning in our life. And I think if we could just think small, we can think about, what can I do today? and how can I leave this world better tomorrow? I think the point of this is to keep trying to make things incrementally better. I think that's one point. I think maybe the point of it is also that everyone has a different point, and that we shouldn't be trying to find our point from other people, but really go on our journey and make sense of who we are. Who are you? And come from a point of honesty and authenticity, giving yourself that time to turn inward, to know that you can be focused, so that whatever step you take next, and whenever you wake up in the morning, whatever point it is that you have is true to who you are. And that's it.
Okay, gang, that's this episode with Aisha. Thanks for all of your support. As always, this episode is available for download on my site, on iTunes, on Google Play, on Stitcher, or TuneIn Radio. And please, please, please subscribe on any of those channels or wherever you're listening to this. And I also love reviews. I love your feedback, any kind. I'll keep you posted with new episodes. Lastly, remember to send me ideas or subscribe to my mailing list on www.talkhuman2.me. Okay, hugs, fist bumps, bye now.